All right, all right. So after that extremely vague panel, we're going to get into some specifics. And we're going to talk about a new project that you're building, Nabyl, called Orbit. And you were telling me backstage that a lot of your frustration with crypto is that a lot of the yields in this industry are bullshit. Okay, explain what you meant by that.
I didn't think you were going to use those words.
I'm using those words. I hope they translated.
Like I was saying, I've been in crypto for a while, and I've been through all the cycles, from the initial days of Bitcoin and then Ethereum and then the ICOs, and then, the whole meme coin and NFTs. And each time, you learn a lesson. And, I came away from the last cycle really believing that all the crypto yield that you're earning is bullshit, because there's no real source of value backing that yield. And that was very frustrating to me because it completely takes away from the whole ethos of the blockchain, which is meant to actually solve real world problems and remove all of those inefficiencies that we were facing in the TradFi world on crypto. And so, that's why we decided to build Orbit as actually a real engine to provide real yield to people.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about your background, because I know you've been a very big player in crypto and generating yield yourself. Talk me through that and what brought you to the motivation to build this.
Yeah, so I've been involved in crypto for a long time. I was explaining to someone earlier today, I bought my first Bitcoin on a USB stick in a parking lot. But I had
seriously.
But I had no idea what to do with it. There was no way to access it. I didn't understand what to do with it, but it was exciting. It was exciting because growing up in Kenya, this was a way to, I saw that there was a future in which there was a different way to participate in the global economy. So I was hooked. And, then, Bitcoin became a little bit more mainstream. And then Ethereum, and when, I looked at Ethereum, it was like, this can be a fully Turing computing platform that you can actually execute things on the blockchain. It was super exciting. By that time, I'd already exited my old world companies, and so I was able to start investing in kind of these types of projects. So it was very early on in Bitcoin and Ethereum, and then at that point, it was very hard to find good projects, because as in the beginning of every cycle, everybody throws everything at the wall, right? And you don't know what's going to stick. So I said, okay, instead of doing that, I'm going to just back some of the funds, right? And through those funds, I ended up getting access to a lot of the great companies that we all know today, and realized that there was really a business in building on the blockchain. But as a participant from the outside, the way for me to make money on it was to try and figure out how to make yield on some of these tokens or some of these protocols. And early on, it was very clear to me that there wasn't really a clear answer why yield was being generated, but everybody was, so hyped. The vibe check for crypto was like, hey, we're hot, just pile into this and you win. And it worked for a little bit, right? And I think that's kind of like the trap that you fall into with crypto, is it works for a little bit, but it's not sustainable. And so over the last few years, I really wanted to focus on finding something that would actually be sustainable, leverage all of the blockchain technology, but solve real problems. And by solving those problems, allow a way to provide sustainable yield to everybody, not just VCs, not just institutions, and definitely not to the gambling retail, because that's kind of like the only access we've had up to that point, right?
Yeah, okay. So a lot of the yield in crypto comes from, one, there's incentives. So projects are throwing tokens at people and saying, please use my product, please use my product. So that's the stuff that's not necessarily sustainable. Then you've got the Fed funds rate.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of projects that basically package up treasuries and give you the yield from that. Orbit is doing something different. Explain to me, where does the yield in Orbit come from?
Yeah, so when we looked at that, I think, in that model, the treasury rate packaging is kind of like the baby step into real global commerce. So when we designed Orbit, the idea was really what drives global commerce is cross-border payments between institutions, right? So when we looked at that model, to make it accessible, you want to create a model where there's no credit risk. And so what we settled in on was this idea that exists already in the TradFi world, which is pre-funded settlements. And what that means is the money is already on hand, but in a different currency, in a different location, and it needs to be sent somewhere else and settled in a different currency, a local currency, at the speed of transaction, which in the TradFi world could take anywhere from 7 to 30 days. And so that's why we ended up designing Orbit as a modular stablecoin protocol that allowed us to generate yield on pre-funded settlements, meaning money that was already in transit.
Okay, so let's give an example. Let's say I'm a company in Kenya.
Correct.
You're a company in the US. I'm paying you. Explain to me what the pre-funded settlement is doing.
So what happens if you use the old example is if I'm in Kenya, I'm operating in shillings. So my first hurdle is I have to convert from shillings to US dollars, which is costly and takes time. Then I have to deal with the central banks and the clearing houses to be able to get that money to you. And on the other hand, and that takes 4 days. And on the other hand, there has to be a conversion. They only want to settle in dollars. So that process also takes time and costs money. So in our model, the pre-funded settlement model, our protocol absorbs all of that Forex cost and clearing cost and allows that transaction to happen instantly across the world, right, on the blockchain. So it's traceable, it's secure, and because it's pre-funded, you are able to basically earn the yield by taking a little bit from the sender and a little bit from the receiver.
Okay, so the company is willing to pay this yield because of the fact that they're getting to settle their transactions faster.
That's right.
So it's almost like you're allowing this settlement fast lane by extending capital up front.
That's right.
Through the deposits.
Which, is really how the banks work, but in that model, they keep all the yield.
Right.
Right? And so we didn't want to replicate the bank. What we wanted to replicate was this idea of a clearinghouse on chain, but allow not only the institutions that wanted to settle participate in a much more efficient economy, but allow everybody to participate in earning a portion of that yield based on their crypto holdings, their treasury, or just trying to come into a product that had sustainable yield.
Okay, so a lot of companies do this. They do this, pre-funded settlement with each other. So what's the pitch to a company of, hey, come on Orbit to do your settlements?
The real pitch is we've now done this for over 2 years. There's over hundreds of companies using it. We've settled billions in transactions, over 10 billion in transactions. And now we have proof. We invested our own capital in a big way earlier this year to test this out, and we've proven the scale, right? So at this point for companies, it's twofold. One, that there's a credibility in the ecosystem to be able to process, which is a big leap of faith for institutions. And the second is we now have the ability to, with our modular stablecoin protocol design, access more liquidity by allowing people to leverage their idle treasury, right? Whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum or treasuries that we can monetize for yield that is being used for these settlements, but is being paid in pre-funded yield, which allows people to participate without risking their assets.
Right, okay. So now you mentioned that it's a modular stablecoin. Explain what that means. What do you mean by modular?
The idea behind the modular stablecoin is, most stablecoins are backed by fiat, or they have some sort of synthetic module behind it, or exchange-backed, like Hyperliquid or Athena or Tether or USDC. But the idea behind a modular stablecoin is that you're able to take any asset, and we're branding it as 0x asset. You'll be able to have a one-to-one relationship between your Bitcoin, for example, and your 0x BTC. And now with that 0x BTC, we're able to facilitate the transactions on chain and allow you to participate in the yield. But you're on the way out, you can claim your BTC for your 0x BTC, and we allow that modular programming, which is, most stablecoins have a programmable interface, which is what makes them, crypto native. And now this allows us to actually extend that across the different chains.
Okay, so I can deposit any of these assets, BTC, USDT, whatever, and I get the 0x version.
Correct.
Which is sort of a claim on the underlying BTC or underlying USDT, which you're using to pre-fund these transactions. Am I locked up? Like, how do I get out?
So that was one of our other concerns, coming from that world and, being locked up and then realizing, hey, you wanted to do something else with your capital. In our design model, the idea is just by holding the 0x asset for however long you hold it, you can earn a yield. Obviously, if you want to earn double-digit yields, then you can stake it or lock it up for a little longer, but we wanted to make it frictionless for everybody to participate. And that way, if you only hold your 0x asset, you can earn the yield for however long you hold it.
So, okay, what kind of yields are we talking about?
So we're talking about 7% yields, which, if you think about it, I dare you, name me one way you can earn that type of yield on Bitcoin, right? It's impossible, right? We've tried, right? On Ethereum, maybe 3-4%, right? And the beauty of our protocol is we can actually stack native yield. Right, so if there was a model in which you wanted to also earn your native yield on your Ethereum validation or validator nodes, and then we could use the 0x asset minted against that to generate a stacked yield from the pre-funded settlements, that's also possible through our modular framework.
I see, okay. So it sounds like there's different ways to get yield in this asset, but anytime there's yield, there's always risk. Explain to me, what are the risks of something like Orbit?
So, I think the one thing to really understand is that because this is pre-funded, there's no credit risk, right? The money is either, in transit or is being settled, right? So the money is already there. The risks are blockchain risks, which are actually systemic, system-wide. If base slows down or something, that's a blockchain risk. But beyond that, the risk is that your capital doesn't earn yield. So, to kind of fix that, we've spent the last few months building up a demand layer from the institution side. So we are now at about $20 billion in demand, waiting to basically consume any of the TVL that we bring on board for 0x assets.
So who are these institutions? Who are these early adopters?
So our early proving ground is in Telco, which has also been my background in the past. And our saying is there's two things that run the world. It's banking and Telco. And people don't realize or think about it. Everything you do, if you're accessing your bank, if you want to send somebody tickets, if you want to call your mother, everything is a telco, right? And so, we started with something we were familiar with, and we've now onboarded over 140 telcos that have already processed $10 billion in the underlying protocol.
And why are these telcos paying each other with these settlements?
So that's all, all of us here, and most of you are local, but a lot of us traveled here, right? And when you travel, you roam on your phone. That roaming is basically has to be a contract between your local carrier and, a carrier here. And those telcos, what they've done in the past is used all of the, TradFi rails we were talking about that are slow, inefficient, have massive Forex risk, cash flow timeline delays. And that's how the world worked up to now. And it was very costly, almost 4x the cost that we're charging them. And so for them, this basically becomes a way to operate, manage their cash flow, and actually transact in real time, which is, as a telco, you'd want to do.
Okay, interesting. So what's really notable here about Orbit is that a lot of the yield that you see in crypto is crypto native. Right? It comes from some demand or some financial asset or some construct that lives purely within crypto. This is demand that lives outside of crypto. These are real businesses.
It's a very good point.
Right. So one of the difficulties of that is okay, you say the risks are pretty low because it's pre-funded. If I'm living in crypto land, how do I know that it's pre-funded? How do I know that the money's really there and that I can say that this is actually low risk?
So the process is basically you only touch Orbit or the protocol layer once the local currency has been converted and is now going to be processed across the protocol. So we never touch anything that has not already been converted to be processed. So the proof is we only get engaged when something is on the way to be settled somewhere else, right?
Got it. Okay. So Orbit, where are you guys at in your launch process? I mean, everyone here is looking for alpha. Give us the alpha. What should we be expecting for Orbit?
We've been in kind of a closed, environment for the last 9 months, proving it out to the tune of $10.5 billion. And where we are now is we're going to be opening it up, both to institutions but also to retail. Because one of our main goals with Orbit was to be able to provide this type of institutional yield to retail to give them a sustainable option that gives you long-term yield. And so right now we're about 3 months away from TG. Everybody can go to orbit.xyz and join the wait list, and start seeing our progress. And we're excited to be able to launch with such high demand. And I think that was one of our big things, is we didn't want to basically make an announcement without having the ability to pay yield on a large amount of TVL. And so we're excited that we were able to do that, and that's why we're now announcing that we're launching today.
Okay, very exciting. So I think we're wrapping up on time. Any one thing you want people to remember when they think about Orbit? What's the one thing they should remember?
Orbit is the place where you can earn steady yield and keep control of your assets, and there's a very low barrier to entry.
Great. Thank you, Nabyl. Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
Haseeb.